Okay, now we've come to the method that watercolor is known for the most, and it's something that is easy to let go of and hard to control. It's called, basically it's called uncontrolled wet and wet. It's different than when you're doing a scale from one hue to the other or a hue to paper, when you're really controlling that slightly dampened area. That's a controlled wet and wet blending. It's great for landscape, it's great for symmetrical objects, it's great for everything really. It's a soft controlled blend that has no indication of puddle or edge or line forming or what they call cauliflowers. That's a different one. That's a controlled wet and wet. This one's probably one of the most fun. It's fun in a way like splattering is fun. Dripping is fun. Sometimes we use a combination of control and letting go. This is an opportunity to really let it go. This is a great way to use a negative space. This is a great way to create an abstract piece, to put interesting elements that people can come towards the painting to examine and see the technique. So it's called Backruns, cauliflowers, uncontrolled wet and wet. Sometimes people get this by putting water on the entire paper first as an underpainting. This is a great underpainting. Let's say you do several of these, set it aside, and then do something else. So it doesn't have to be anything. In this case, it would be the negative space. But if I just did, let's say I'm doing a study later, but I want to try a bunch of different underpaintings. I could do a bunch of different underpaintings and then apply my drawing on top later. That creates so much more interest. When you can see through a drawing or a painting to a whole other world, boy, that's much more dynamic than just this thing sitting on the paper. So it's kind of like when you use white as positive space, same thing. So sometimes people will wet the whole thing. Something people do a lot is throw the paper in the sink so that it's totally wet before you start blocking it in. You could have a subject in front of you, you could have nothing in front of you, but you can wet the whole thing, or you can wet enough of it to really feel like it's soaked. I like to leave a little bit because then you have these interesting things that happen with the white. The white comes forward without having to do lift out, without having to lose it completely, or mask it off, or tape it off, or whatever, wax it off. This way you have options, and you can always add more water later. With cauliflowers and backruns, you're not trying to control it. You're just painting stuff in there. And, but it's not random, of course, creating a design. But you want different saturations. You can kind of blob it in, place it in. It's always nice to have some neutrals or some black in there just to create some nuance. So it's not a rainbow. It's kind of going with the earthy autumn here colors. Some values. I'm not a fan of using black light by itself, so I'm going to mix a little bit of mud into it, or red, maybe some red into it. So of course I could blot this. I could do all kinds of things with this. I could throw more water on this. I could pick it up and let it drip, which is kind of fun. I can do anything to this. I can blot it. I'm just nuancing this area. And you don't even have to do this part. I just felt like it needed that. But right now, I'm just going to throw it away. Not throw it away, but like put it to the side, drip some water on it. And then on its own, it's going to create backruns. You're not going to see them right away. So I'm going to set it aside. And then I'm going to do this one just so you can kind of see. Let's say I'm actually applying this technique to a picture or a design or whatever. I want to, again, put water in the back. Doesn't matter if it's got a color to it. It can be blank. But I'm going to the edge because of that being a subject. I don't want to go past there. This isn't perfect, but I wanted you to see how loose it can be. And maybe by the time this one's done creating cauliflowers, that other one, then this one can dry and I can show you. These are the beginnings of the cauliflower. You can see how leaving white, it gives you a little more. I'm being a mess right here, but it's okay because that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And you don't need to splatter, that's a whole different technique, but I'm just trying to create these interesting wet and wet uncontrolled backruns. So let me take this aside. It's just so you can see you have the option of putting this in the negative space. That's one way to use it. You can use it on a lot of different things, and you can use it in conjunction with a lift out. You could create a glow. You could create outer space. I'm going to put a little more. I'm still nuancing it. Don't want to overwork it, but I want to have a balance. Kind of like that glow happening. I'm going to set this aside. And what starts to happen, which is very common in watercolor, are these cauliflowers. They start to appear, and it's not from lift out. Lift out can push it that way, but it starts to separate, and it takes time. This is not going to be ready to go for a while, but that's where you start when you're doing that. When you're doing that wet and wet, uncontrolled backrun cauliflower. This will take some time to get there, so I'll take a picture and post it with the video.